What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Before I get started today, and what I'm expecting is going to be a shorter episode, but before I get there, I just want to say thank you, first of all, because yesterday I posted, almost a 40-minute video on salary cap minutia, and you guys are the best because the comments and the likes and everything were just out of this world for an episode on salary cap jargon and all of that. And second of all, I just want you to know you're all sick and just as much as football junkies as I am. And I just so much appreciate you for that. This audience is amazing and I can't thank you enough. If you didn't check out that episode, it was one that definitely got a lot of just really kind words to say about it. And it was one that a lot of people found helpful. So if you are confused in regards to the salary cap or all the void years, contracts, signing bonuses, base money, all of the stuff that you could possibly imagine, check yesterday's episode out. And I just want to say thank you again, because if anyone ever wants to accuse me of clickbaiting, I just posted a video on salary cap minutia. And like I said, you guys are just the best for not only being a part of this every day and watching those videos, but for the kind words as well. Very much appreciate that. And it just reiterates to me how awesome, again, this audience is and just how much you guys appreciate hardcore football stuff. And that's really, really cool to me. So thank you so much for that. One news and note in regards to the Aaron Rodgers situation, Diana Rossini posted on Twitter that, quote, "The New York Jets are really interested in Derek Carr. Nothing but positive reviews per sources. Now they wait for Aaron Rodgers to emerge from the darkness and inform the Packers of his plans. The Jets will be speaking to Green Bay about a trade if the Packers are willing." So I think it was Tom Pelissero had a report as well that this is still in Aaron Rodgers' hands at this point, that I think he reported that the Packers are still willing to bring him back next season. And this is, again, where we get into reading between the lines. You've got certain reports are that the Packers are disgusted with Aaron. You've got other reports that they're more than welcoming of him coming back if he's all in and wants to come back to this team. So we are just in that sweet spot where it's you get to trust your source and you get to fill in the void with whatever it is that you want to think in this situation, because nobody really seems to know for sure. And we're just stuck in that familiar yet odd yet frustrating situation of, can we just get this over with and figure out if Aaron is going to be the starting quarterback of the Packers or not, so we can move forward accordingly, which is also now affecting other teams and other quarterback situations, which we care a lot less about at this moment, but again, is very important if the Packers want to get the most draft compensation that they possibly can in return for Aaron if they do decide to trade him. We've been through this, we know this, but the latest is that the Jets are interested in Derek Carr, but they, like everyone else, is just waiting for Aaron to see what he wants to do at this point. All right, my main topic for today is Monday's void deadline, basically. So that was the deadline for when all of the Packers voided contracts were set to officially void. And the Packers did have some flexibility where they could have extended those players out, potentially in saving some of that voided cap hit in this season, and they could have pushed it out to future seasons, but they couldn't do that without them actually signing a new extended contract. So there was some question as of Monday if there would be any extensions for the players whose contracts were set to void. Those players whose contracts did officially void, and I didn't want to go over this on Tuesday because sometimes what happens is some of that news is late to leak out. So I didn't want to, post a video on Tuesday that said all these contracts voided early Tuesday morning when I post it, and then all of a sudden Tuesday at noon we get an update of like, oh, actually 3 of these players signed extensions that just didn't get approved by the league office, etc., etc. So as of now, going into Wednesday, I can officially say Adrian Amos, Mason Crosby, Dean Lowry, Mercedes Lewis, Jarran Reed, Randall Cobb, and Robert Tonyan all had their contracts void on Monday. So they are, as of this point, no longer official members of the Green Bay Packers. Their contracts are voided, and they will become unrestricted free agents when the free agency period opens. They are not released players, so they cannot immediately sign contracts right now with new teams, but they are unrestricted free agents when the start of the new league year happens and when free agency officially opens. Those names one more time: Adrian Amos, Mason Crosby, Dean Lowry, Mercedes Lewis, Jarran Reed, Randall Cobb, and Robert Tonyan. All of those voided contracts combined come to a total of $16.4 million in dead salary cap for 2023. This year. that they can no longer spend. So the initial salary cap was $224.8 million. If you subtract that 16.4 in dead void cap hits, most of which was Adrian Amos's, you have 208.4 million remaining. So most other teams operating with 224.8 or plus with carryover cap, the Packers now have 16.4 million less than they would have had they not had those voided contracts. And that is where you get into this slippery slope. And we discussed this ad nauseum yesterday as to why there is a legit thing as the salary cap. And you're basically putting yourself behind the 8 ball if you continue to do these type of deals. When we were looking at the last few seasons, 2020, 2021, 2022, and you looked at the roster, you're like, yeah, I kind of want to keep that team together and make a run at things. And that's all well and good. That was probably the right decision. In hindsight, I guess you can say it wasn't because they didn't end up winning anything. But at the time, I think we all would have said, yes, probably trying to win a Super Bowl with those teams did make some sense. Maybe you didn't agree with it completely, but I think you would at least have to say you understood the decision at the time. In fact, I think if anything, some people would probably say they wish they would have gone more all in, especially in 2020, especially in 2021. And you could maybe put 2019, 2020, and 2021. 2022, of course, didn't go exactly according to plan. You know what I mean, though? So I think we all would have said, hey, maybe Green Bay should have put more resources into those seasons to try to get over the hump. But it's really hard to say that like they should have done less or anything like that, except with the benefit of hindsight. But now you end up in this no man's land situation where you were sort of aggressive in building those teams, especially in 2020 and 2021, and keeping the band together and trying to make another run at a Super Bowl. And you kind of did some of that in 2022 as well. And now you have nothing to show for it. You have no Super Bowl. In fact, in those 3 13-win seasons and in those 4 seasons as a whole with Matt LaFleur as coach, you have a total of 2 playoff wins. And you borrowed money from the future in order to keep those teams together, which basically is now undercutting your attempts to win in 2023 and in 2024. And it's not to say that you can't win. It's not to say that Green Bay can't open up some avenues for additional salary cap. And it's not to say that they don't already have super talented players on their roster. When you have guys on your roster like Rashawn Gary, Jair Alexander, Aaron Rodgers coming off of MVP seasons, Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark, if I didn't say his name already, like you can go on and on. When you have those talented players, what do you want to do? You want to keep them on your team, and you can still build a team around those super talented players. So this isn't a doom and gloom. This isn't to say that Green Bay's screwed and you might as well just give up on the next, handful of seasons because other teams are going to have more salary cap. You still have to find good players. And right now, Green Bay still has very good players on their roster, but it is more difficult to supplement the talent around them. And now your front office is in a position, which to be fair, Green Bay's been pretty good at, of finding guys like your Devondre Campbells, your Rasul Douglases, your Keyshawn Nixons, and those type of players that you need to hit on, Rudy Ford, etc. And like I said, Green Bay's actually done a pretty good job of doing some, bargain basement shopping. But sometimes for every Rasul Douglas or Devondre Campbell, there's a Sammy Watkins too. And some of those guys are not going to turn out, and you're not going to get your ROI, and they're not going to be able to come in and do what you're hoping that they will do. So there is a little bit of a give and take there, and it just makes it that Green Bay has to be really good at finding those bargain players, and it means that they have to be really good at being effective in the draft. So that's where we're at right now. Again, $16.4 million in dead cap space. I know somebody asked in the comments, I think it was a day ago or 2 days ago, of if there were any of these players that I would have liked to have seen, basically extended prior to the deadline. And I think ultimately my answer right now is probably not. And that's not to say that I don't want any of those players back. And I should be clear, those players can still end up back in Green Bay. In fact, Robert Tonyan and Devondre Campbell, who voided last year, were back with the team a few weeks later when they signed new contracts with the team. So Amos Crosby, Lowry, Lewis, Reed, Cobb, and Tonyan can all still be Packers in 2023. It's not like their contracts voided and now Green Bay can't negotiate with them or can't bring them back. They're just free agents, and Green Bay has as much right as any other team to negotiate with those players. In fact, they have the ability to negotiate with them still now, whereas other teams can't until the free agency period actually opens, assuming you believe that teams actually don't tamper, which is another story for another day. But back to the question, would I have gone out and potentially tried to extend any of these players? I think it's just really hard right now. And that's where Green Bay is in this no man's land of, is your QB Aaron Rodgers or is your QB Jordan Love? And I do think there is some carryover in how Green Bay is going to want to build this team, regardless of whether Jordan Love or Aaron Rodgers is at quarterback. But some of these players are, every one of them is 28 or older. And the 28s are, I think, Dean Lowry is 28. I think Amos is 28 or 29. You know, you've Tonyan is 28. All of them are 28 or older. And a lot of these players are probably only back in some capacity if you're trying to make a run at a Super Bowl. Like, and again, we can debate whether Green Bay should or shouldn't do that. I've given my stance on that numerous occasions. But if Green Bay ultimately decides that they want to try to make another run at this thing with Aaron Rodgers, then you could see, you know, more likely maybe a Mason Crosby coming back, maybe a Mercedes Lewis coming back, maybe a Randall Cobb coming back. Those would start making more sense if Aaron is actually back at quarterback. Robert Tonyan could be another one of those. If Aaron is not back, now you start looking at, and I talk about this all the time, when's your next window? So if your next window, if you're thinking, all right, Jordan's going to start at quarterback this year, we're going to need some time to evaluate Jordan. We're a little bit behind the salary cap 8 ball for the next couple seasons. We want to probably look at 2025, 2026 as our next open window. And then the question that you ask is, do Randall Cobb and Mercedes Lewis and Mason Crosby help you in that 2026 window? And the answer is clearly no. Those players will be retired by that point. Let's just be real. In 2026, Mason Crosby, Mercedes Lewis, you know, those type of guys, Randall Cobb, are probably going to be retired and have ridden off into the sunset by that point. So the point being is that you want to develop younger players so that those young players, your next tight end, your next kicker, your next wide receiver, are ready. You know, those players are ready when you're starting to make that run, hopefully in 2025, 2026. So that's why we talk about when is the next window. And if it's Jordan Love, your next window isn't right now in all possibility. And you might look me in the eye and say, Andy, I actually think Green Bay has a better opportunity to win if Jordan Love is at quarterback. I'm not sure I totally agree, even though I am very much on team, it's time to move to Jordan Love. But even if you believe that, this team set up the way that it is with a first-year starting quarterback. I know he's not a first-year quarterback, but he'd be a first-year starting quarterback. The odds that that team goes on and wins a Super Bowl, nothing's impossible in the NFL, but it would be very improbable. And you certainly don't want to put your chips into that basket. You want to start looking at what seasons make the most sense. And sometimes you can accelerate that. And just being, you know, when we look back at 2010, when the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010, I would actually argue that that team, like, I think the Packers were eyeing 2011 as like the year that they were going to be ready to compete for a Super Bowl. And 2011, of course, was the one-loss season. And I think the season where everyone thought Green Bay was going to repeat, that was like the juggernaut Packer team. But at the end of 2010, they kind of got hot at the right time and they pick up a couple late season wins to sneak in the playoffs. And all of a sudden, you beat the Eagles and you beat the Falcons and you beat the Bears and you beat the Steelers and you're hoisting a Lombardi trophy. So it's not to say that you can't accelerate things if things start going correctly. But as you look at it from a GM standpoint, you're looking at win probabilities and when that window is likely open, and you're probably looking a few years from now. So long answer short is that if I look at any of those players, I need to at least know, is Aaron back or is Jordan going to be my quarterback? And then based on that answer, when is my window? If my window is right now, yeah, I might, you know, have a conversation with Cobb and Lewis and Tonyan and, you know, Crosby and those guys to see, all right, are they our best options to win right now? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but those conversations happen. And if it's Love, I'm probably looking a few years down the road, and I'm probably not looking to bring in stopgap one-year guys when Jordan Love's my quarterback this year. So that is the answer there. And for those players too, rather than sign an extension now with Green Bay, they're going to be better off if they, all of them are going to be better off if they hit the free agent market. So unless Green Bay's overpaying a little bit right now, which Green Bay's not going to be in the interest of doing, especially given the current circumstance and situation, yeah, I just think you're at a situation where it just made sense from all sides, where Green Bay's better off to wait, the player's better off to wait, and that's ultimately why we didn't see any extensions get done on Monday. So that's kind of my main topic for today. And like I said, this is just another example, and we talked about this ad nauseum in the salary cap episode. Again, check that out if you haven't already. But this is why it's a little bit of a buyer beware when you want to talk about going all in or borrowing from future years, because now you have $16 million less to spend in free agent space. Like, imagine you could go out and sign somebody to a 1 year $16.4 million deal, or if you want to sign them to, a couple players adding up to $16 million. Imagine the type of caliber player you could add to your team with that money. And instead it's just gone. It's dead. You've used it on previous seasons. You've already burnt it up. It's already been used and you have nothing to show for it in those previous seasons. So there's a time and a place to use that. And I don't think Green Bay was out of place by using it when they did, But when you don't end up with anything out of it, it makes that pill certainly harder to swallow. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.